And a good Saturday morning to you. Welcome once again to Health Matters with Dr. Jim Warner of Warner Chiropractic in Rockford, Illinois. I'm Fred Scholl. That's Dr. Jim on your right, and we have a guest in the middle this morning.
Yes, we do. And this morning we're having my wife, Janet, as our guest, and she's going to help us out today, Fred, because my wife is the mother of 4 children. We've had 4 children, and 4 healthy children, I might say. And I thought there's probably a number of mothers that are listening today that wonder, what can I do to make sure that my kids stay healthy? Now, our kids are grown up, and we're waiting for grandchildren right now, but there's a lot of things that we did in the 28 years that we were having children at home, and we'd like to share some of those things of what people can do to keep their families healthy.
Well, that's a very important topic, and I know that anyone that has children wants their kids to be healthy.
Absolutely. So let me introduce my wife, Jan, if you want to say hello to everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, well, what is important in raising healthy kids? Are we talking about nutrition?
Well, that's one of the things that we can talk about. Another thing is discipline. I think that goes hand in hand as far as raising children go. If you don't have the correct discipline, how are you going to get the correct foods down them?
Well, that's very practical, isn't it? Eat your green beans, and if your kids don't obey you, the green beans aren't going to help them.
That kind of reminds me of something, Fred. My mother was raised in Nazi Germany, and food was very difficult for her family. They had one piece of meat for a family of 6 kids, and a mother. So 7 people had to eat one piece of meat. It lasted for a week. And my mother raised me very strictly, and I had to eat everything on that plate. And there was one time there were some green beans that tasted pretty bad, and I didn't want to eat them, but my mother made me sit there for about 3 hours, and she would reheat the food until I ate it. So we weren't exactly like that at our house.
We were not like that.
But we did have some discipline there for our kids, and a lot of times people, you always see them at restaurants and such, people with children, and the kids determine what they want to eat, and the parents let them slide.
Right, and the question is, how do you get your kids to obey? Because I know certain times mothers will yell, and the kids will just, kind of act like they didn't hear them. And the mother, has to get to a place where she's throwing a tantrum herself or screaming at her kids. I mean, that she doesn't have to, but you often see something like that, and of course that isn't discipline.
No. I think what we did was basically start when they're really young, of course, but at home. You start at home, and you make sure that what you do at home is no different than what you do in public. If there's a situation that gets totally out of hand, then you need to remove the child from public and deal with it. But basically, being consistent with your discipline is important. As far as food goes, in disciplining, getting food down them, the correct kind of food, starting out young so their taste buds develop in such a manner that they know what is good and what is not good. As far as bread goes, they go to grandparents' houses that prefer to have white bread. Well, at home they get brown bread, the whole wheat bread, and they know the difference. Yeah, the white bread is fluffy and it tastes better and it goes down smoother, but there's a different texture to the whole wheat bread, and they can tell the difference, and they're accustomed to it. So it's not a big issue when we get whole wheat bread or whole wheat noodles or anything else that's wholesome. They can tell the difference, and to this day as adults, they prefer the whole wheat stuff.
And I think in our culture, you're really kind of going against the grain, no pun intended, when you try to give your kids healthy foods, because so much of the junk food is, right before them all the time.
Oh, yeah. Sugar is a huge issue. I can't remember the exact poundage that they have done studies on how much sugar is consumed by each individual and even children. It's becoming an epidemic in the United States as far as sugar intake is concerned. As children, we really limited their amount of sugar. Even peanut butter and jelly, sandwiches, the peanut butter that you buy typically in the store has sugar in it. So it was when the kids were younger, buying natural peanut butter was a very hard thing to do. Today, you can go to the supermarket and you can get natural
Right.
peanut butter without the sugar in it. But it was a struggle then. But the kids know the difference. They can taste the difference and know that there's a more peanutty taste in the natural than there is with the sugar-induced peanut butter. Jelly. When the kids were growing up, I was so strict about sugar intake that we got the kind that had no sugar in it.
But if it's natural, it still has a natural sweetness to it.
Oh yeah, natural. Yeah,
There's sugar from the fruit that's in the whole fruit, and that's what it says. It says whole fruit on there, and it might be grapes, it might be peaches, it might be something. It is jelly. There's just no sugar in it.
Well, what are the disadvantages of too much of this refined sugar?
you get kids that can't be controlled.
So, in other words, it affects their behavior.
Yeah.
No, I know that's true. I'm kind of playing the devil's advocate here, but I've seen little kids on sugar buzzes, and it's not a pretty sight.
No, and I could tell when the kids came home from Grandma's house and they had been given a whole bunch of candy and all kinds of treats, their behavior was totally different than what they normally would behave, and it was a struggle to get them back into the routine of healthy living. But kids are easier to discipline. It's easier for them to learn, even in school, if they have the correct amount of nutrition in their systems.
There are certain schools, Fred, that even now they're saying, okay, no sugar. We're going to take the pop machines and the candy machines out of the cafeteria because they know that the kids will learn better without the sugar, without the highs and lows of blood sugar, hyperactivity. You know, nowadays, Fred, this is really coming out again, but for a long time, they knew it was sugar, but they thought, well, let's just give them a Ritalin instead.
Right.
You know, it's so hard. It's so hard to keep the sugar out of the diet. So let's give them some Ritalin. Let's just calm them down because we don't want to follow the proper things.
You know, when I was growing up, my mom used to really make some healthy food. She baked her own bread. Wheat germ was included, blackstrap, molasses. I mean, she really got into it. And as a child, eating that kind of food, I became very accustomed to it. Couldn't stand white bread and can't to this day because of that. So it's what you get used to doing.
Right.
But what about parents who say, okay, I have sinned, but it's too late. My kids are already on this stuff. What can they do?
They can do it two different ways. You can do it cold turkey.
Quit all at once.
Yeah. You can have a real struggle with that one, or you can start decreasing it. You know, start watching it and decrease it gradually, and the child can develop a better understanding of what's going on. And there again, consistency is important, and being patient and not falling for the whiny kid. You know,
and you know, Fred, you don't have to be real strict on this. You can just do some little things to make some big changes, and then, you know, your kids are going to get out of the house, and they're going to eat at a neighbor's house, and they're going to get some junk or so. That's not a big deal as long as you're doing things right. And then, you know, if they get off the wagon a little bit, that's okay. But the problem is when you got the typical American household that they're getting junk all the time, and they're, 80% of our youth are overweight. And it's because of all the junk food that they're eating, all the processed food, and they're not getting enough of the fresh fruit. We've always had fresh fruit at our house. That, I'm hungry. Well, eat an apple, instead of getting a bag of potato chips or so. Makes a big difference.
I think it does make a big difference. And if you kind of watch it around the home, you're really setting the pace for their life and for their health.
My wife said that even to this day, and it was just a few months ago that my one daughter said, Dad, every time I go to buy groceries, I always think that you're right there with me. She says, it feels like you're right on my shoulder, and I got to get something good to eat instead of something junky. And I said, that's right. I said, I could be at the very next aisle. They're just watching you, so you better just keep it up.
One thing I need to mention here is that you really need to look at the labels. Just because something says it's whole wheat or 100% nutritious, that does not necessarily mean that that's actually what it is. You have to look at the ingredients.
Don't go by the advertising, go by the ingredients, which is required by law.
Correct. And the first items that are listed they're kind of listed in the order of how much is in the
Right.
in the ingredient or in the product. So the first ingredient you need to make sure that it is a wholesome ingredient. Like I'll say 100% whole wheat bread. It may not be really 100% whole wheat bread. It might have whole ground wheat
sometimes
as the first
sometimes
ingredient,
it'll
but
say,
it have white bread or white wheat next to it. So it's not really 100%. So
Right.
you really need to look at your labels.
yeah, it might say wheat bread, and people say, "Oh, this is wheat bread." And well, look at the label, see what it says. Well, first thing it says bleached white flour is the number one thing. Then there's water. Then there's sugar. Then there's shortening. Then there's that, and then finally, there's some whole wheat flour in there too. Yeah, just enough. And then there's some caramel coloring in there to make it look nice and brown. This is real wheat bread.
I know a lot of times, too, parents are fooled by these so-called fruit drinks, which are 10% fruit, and the
Yeah.
rest of it is sugar water.
Right.
And
right.
just need to read the ingredients.
Right.
Yeah, it has to say 100% juice on it. That's what it has to say. And so when you're buying something, just because when it says fruit drink, it's not a fruit drink.
Right.
It's 10% fruit drink or 1%.
Actually, if you think about it, fruit drink, it is a drink with fruit in it.
Right.
It's not fruit juice.
Right. Absolutely.
So, it's really tricky how they advertise it. So you need to be really careful.
Well, we just have a couple of minutes left here, but besides the nutrition part of raising healthy families, any other advice to add?
Well, chiropractic treatments. I mean, we raised our children on that. They did not get immunized. They did not get shots. They never got sick. Had 4 kids. And
They
healthy.
also got their first adjustments within minutes of birth.
Yeah, at least the last couple of them did. So chiropractic treatments are extremely effective in keeping kids healthy, and they respond very well. If they start getting a bug, get them to the chiropractor, get a chiropractic treatment. We talked in the past about having proper humidity in the house, especially during the wintertime. They're less likely to get colds and flu, making sure they're getting enough sleep. Making sure they get exercise. Those are things that you start early on in a childhood, and it becomes part of their lifestyle, and then they carry that on later on.
Well, Dr. Jim, I've always appreciated your understanding of the human anatomy and what goes into healthy living, and I know that treating the source rather than the symptom is the number one thing, and that's basically what we're talking about today with nutrition. Well, our special guest today has been Jan Warner, along with Dr. Jim, her husband, and it's been enjoyable. If people want more information, I know you have it.
They can call us at 815-398-8111. That's our phone number. Or they can contact us on the web, www.warnerchiro.com.
Well, Jan and Jim, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Have a great day.
And that'll do it for Health Matters today.